shop getting ready for their career fair. And my name is Jody. I'm a career counselor at the Career Development Center, and I am the liaison for Crimson School of Education and Human Development, also the College of Arts and Humanities, and also the Undeclareds.
Hi, I'm Sheila Gallagher Price, and I'm a career liaison for the College of Social Sciences. I'm part of the employer relations team, and I'm the on-campus student employment specialist at Fresno State.
All right, so we're going to start off with a poll. So, Damien. All right, so this one is, what is a resume? So go ahead and choose the multiple choice. Is it a marketing tool, a list of experiences, highlights of my education? The other one is, ultimate purpose of a resume is to get an interview, introduce yourself to an employer, or to get a job. And then lastly, how much time does employers spend on average reviewing a resume? Up to 5 minutes, around 3 minutes, no more than 1 minute, or less than 30 seconds.
So those of you that are participating today, if you could answer the poll, it'd be helpful for us. Thank you. I think we're ready.
All right, so the biggest thing is when we think about a resume is actually a marketing tool. So you're marketing your skills and abilities for that one position you're applying to. So I know that you've heard before, there's not one resume that fits all, and that's basically it. So you kind of have to tweak your resume each time that you're applying to a new position. Even though they're very similar, you kind of have to move things around. So indeed, it is a marketing tool. It does list your experiences, it does highlight your education, but it's much more than that. The other part is, ultimate purpose of a resume is to get an interview. A lot of it is getting an interview, but also introducing to an employer is kind of like a catch-22. But ultimately, the purpose of a resume is to get that interview so you could ultimately get the job. The last one would be, how much time does an employer spend on average reviewing a resume? Most people will say it's around 3 minutes, but actually it's less than a minute. Typically it ranges from 7 minutes all the way to, 7 seconds to 45 seconds for the initial reviewing. That's why it's so important to critique your resume to make sure it's a marketing tool for that one position.
Hey, Jody, I just want to remind them all while we're reviewing this today, if they have any questions, feel free to use the chat box, and we'll do our best to get to all of your questions, either live or texting you or messaging you while the presentation's going on.
All right. So let's continue on.
So working?
Yes.
There we go.
So this is you.
I know, right? So part of the elements that we want to discuss today to have an effective resume, it's going to look like this. And we came up with this formatting because we subscribe to NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And we have, this organization is vetted across the nation with employers and what they look for in a resume. And we came up with, not we personally, Fresno State, but the NACE Association came up with this template in the best layout that employers like to see resumes. So I have a question, Jody, about how long does it take an employer to review a resume before they decide whether they're going to interview you or not?
Well, typically it's about 7 seconds that they'll review your resume. So when you're actually looking at your resume, the biggest thing is making sure that the most important and relevant is at the top, and then it gets to the least relevant, because within 7 seconds, the biggest thing that they're going to be looking at is your contact information, your objective, your skills and qualifications to your education. So it's typically less than the first quarter or a third of the top page.
So I like to tell students, when you're creating your resume, this is your as Jody said, 7 to 50 seconds of a snapshot of you to capture their attention to want to interview you?
So ultimately, there's different areas. You have your contact information, your objective, your skills and qualifications. We will be going over each of these sections. So this just kind of gives you a nice visual at the beginning. We also have our experiences and then membership, awards, and other areas.
So formatting your resume. There's some key points that I want to go over today when formatting that I see every once in a while in the chronological order being out of order. It's critical that you list your most current and then work backwards. If an employer has to hunt and find where you're currently working or what you currently have done, then they're going to move on to the next resume. So make sure that you use reverse chronological order. Be consistent with your formatting. If you're going to use the month and the year, make sure you do that same throughout the whole resume. If you're going to spell out the month or you're going to use the numerical for that month, do it consistently throughout. Proofread and have others review. I can't tell you how many times I've seen grammatical errors, either spelling or the wrong usage of the word. For example, we like to use keep calm and carry on. Well, you can keep clam, C-L-A-M, and it comes back correctly, but the word is really calm instead of clam. So it's always good to have another set of eyes look at your resume. We recommend limiting it to 1 page. Any longer than that, employers tend to flip it over. There's the recommended page is single page, but if you have significant amount of experience, it's okay to go into a second page on that resume. Use action verbs. In our career success guide that we're going to talk about and reference here, which can be found on our home page of our website about midway through, we have both in magazine format and a PDF version that you download. We recommend that you do this. There are 2 pages, I believe, 19 and 20, Jody, are
Yes.
the pages for the action verbs that we recommend you incorporate into your resume when talking about your experiences or your clubs, organizations, or your projects, what internships, what have you. And then when you do list these experiences, make sure that you list present tense on those that you are currently doing and past tense on those you have done in the past, and be consistent with that. And then we say bullet points, because remember, the resume is just a snapshot of who you are, and the rest of that will come out during the interview process. A lot of students might struggle with what bullet points to do, and we'll go over that today on how to formulate bullet points in the experience section. And then whenever possible, quantify. And what we mean by that is if you're part of a group project or you've done trainings, mentorings, overseeing, make sure you list the number of people that you have trained or you oversee or that you were a lead in, because it shows a picture of your leadership abilities and your capabilities and what you've done in your previous or current experience. And then most importantly, value the work you've done. I see a lot of times students leave off critical information that really an employer would want to know and find valuable. So make sure you include everything that you've done during this time.
All right,
If
and
I
put up the
can,
answer. Oh, I was going to answer the question. What
okay,
happens when you don't have worked for, or what happens when you have not worked for at least 5 years? So if you haven't worked, if I'm reading this correctly, you worked before and then you took 5 years off and then you worked, and now you're going to school and whatnot. A lot of times you could explain that in a cover letter if you have a gap in your employment. Now, if this is something about your lack of experience, the biggest thing is what we're going to be covering today is that you do have experience. The value, everything that you have done is very important. So you could pull from class projects, you could pull from volunteerism and internships. So there's a lot of things that you could pull from, even relevant coursework. So we'll be discussing that today.
And that's a good question, Jody. I had a student just yesterday, I'm sorry, today's Monday, last week, where she had taken a year off after graduation because she was caring for an elderly member of her family. So it's important when we talk about it today that we cover, even if you think it's not relevant in that gap year or that year you were taking off caring for somebody, it's all relevant experience. And it'll come out in other ways, right?
Yes. And the other thing is, can military service be used as leadership? It can be used in a variety of fashions. You definitely want to list your military service. If you are a veteran, then definitely go onto the different sites. All you have to do is Google military to civilian resumes, and what they will do is say, this is the position you had in the military. This is equivalent to how you would put it on a resume, because you don't want to use certain terminology, because the civilian life, we have no idea what you're talking about, but at the same time, it will do that for you. So there's a lot of sites out there, and you could always work with Russell on that, or you could also work with your liaison, and we could help you with that. But it could go under leadership, relevant experience. It depends on what your major is and what experience you're bringing to the table.
Yes, somebody else is asking, do I include club leaderships during college? Absolutely. And we'll talk about the sections that we want to include that in, right, Jody?
Yes. All right, so we'll go to the next. All right, so part of the elements, now we're going to be talking about your contact information. So with the contact information, it's typically at the very top. The biggest thing is, don't get really cutesy and try to put it at the bottom or on the side. We want to keep it very consistent. That's where employers are wanting to see it. Also, if it gets scanned, it should be at the very top. So when we look at the contact information, there's different ways that you might have seen it on a resume. That middle one that takes up 4 lines is definitely somebody who's a freshman or sophomore that's trying to fill up the page. So be very cautious of doing the middle one, especially if you're a junior or senior, or even if you're a freshman that has a lot of experience. The thing about freshmen is you could actually bring experience in from high school, so you might have a lot more information there. So using that top or that middle one that's using 3 lines, not necessarily the best thing. Should you put an address or should you not put an address? If you notice, the top one puts an address. So if you are uploading this like on Indeed or in some like LinkedIn, you definitely don't want to put your address on there. If you're applying directly to an employer, it's perfectly fine to put your address on there, because typically they're going to want to contact you regardless. If you're applying to like a tech company or within that realm, it's not really necessary, but you do get some bonus points by saying that you're local. So you still want to put down that you're from that area, like the Fresno area and whatnot. If you're applying to Southern California, let's say because you're originally from LA, then make sure that you put an address, or that you say that that you live in Downing, California, and just use a parent or a relative address. Because ultimately what happens is, when an employer looks at this, it's one of the first things that they see. They're going to wonder first where Fresno is. And then secondly, they're going to wonder, why does this person want to move here? Do they understand the traffic? Do they understand what it's like to live here, the cost of living? They're going to ask a lot of questions. So you may or may not get called, because they're wanting somebody to be able to start work quickly. And they're going to think it's going to take a month to get you on board. The other thing with this is, if you notice, the top part has the name with the middle initial. Let's say that you don't go by your first name, but your middle name. So just put it as an initial and then the name that you typically use. And if you have a name that you typically don't use and you have a nickname, then you could follow the one at the bottom, Victorious, but you typically go by Victor. And so there's different ways of doing it. So just make sure that the biggest thing is you have your name. It's in bold. It's typically much larger than the rest of your font. If your font's typically 12, then your name will be closer to 18 to maybe even 20, depending on the style that you're using. Always list your phone number. You do not need to say it's a cell phone because that's more of a given this day and time. And then also your email address. One question I get asked a lot, should I use my Fresno State email? Perfectly fine. Once you graduate, you'll still have access to your Fresno State email. We can't take it away. It's a Google account. So you can still utilize it. If you want to move it to a Gmail or just something different, that's perfectly fine. But that's typically the biggest thing. If you are pointing them to the direction, like on the bottom, it says LinkedIn. If you're pointing them to the LinkedIn account, make sure there's a reason you're having them send there. Don't just send them someplace just to look at it. So you should have your references there. You should have a lot of good information. You might have posted, so it shows that level of expertise.
Jody, I think now's a good time to talk about or just mention appropriate email addresses.
Okay, so appropriate email addresses is typically your name or a number. You don't want to get it too cutesy like Anna Banana at, because that's a 3-year-old. You also don't want to have it more like, yes, I have seen like doing it doggy style because we are the Bulldogs. I get it. I understand, but no. You have to keep it very professional at all times. And you also have to stay away from the best accountant, the best teacher, because you're brand new to the field. You're not the best yet.
Thanks, Jody.
You're welcome. Sorry, something just popped up on mine. Sheila?
Yes. When it was frozen on my end, so
okay.
if for some reason I freeze out on my MiFi, I'm just letting everyone know Jody will take over and resume. The objective, when we talk about the objective, and that's usually that comes right either ahead of the education or right after your name and address, contact information, we have it laid out in this format: short, sweet, to the point, to obtain the whatever position you're vying for, using the skills mention the skills that you have to offer. I see lots of times when students come in and they talk about their objective, it's something to the effect of, I'm hoping to gain these skills or this experience in. Remember, employers are looking for what you can offer them, not what they can
resume. Offer. Oh, Sheila?
Yeah.
You stopped, sorry.
Oh, okay.
So basically, the biggest thing is it came about back in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s before there was really online applying and applications. So ultimately, it was basically when you mailed it in and you said, this is the position I'm applying to, in case your cover letter and your resume got separated. Real estate, which is the first 7 seconds, 45 seconds that the employer is looking at your resume, to basically tell them, I know you just read my cover letter. I know I'm applying to this internship, but just in case you have short-term memory, I'm applying to this internship. So you're basically listing it twice. So ultimately, our thought process on this is, if you are going to include an objective, what you want to make sure is it's short and sweet and to the point. Don't go on and on, because it's ultimately not really needed anymore. So when we start thinking about your skills and qualifications, this is a selling point. This is something that you could really highlight to the employer to say, these are the things that I excel at, I'm outstanding, these are my strengths, my abilities, and it's related to the job. The way that you choose what should be on a summary of skills and qualifications is looking at that job description. That's your key. That's why not one resume fits all. You have to look at the job description and highlight it. I highly stress print it out. I know printing, but print it out, highlight the areas that needs to be a reflection on your own resume. And then focus on that. Quantify whenever possible, meaning I was a food server for many years when I was going through school. I trained so many people, but I never thought about how many people did I train. So think about how many people you typically train, because if you're a food server, a bartender, a clerk at any place, you have trained somebody. There's always a new person that comes in, so you do understand what it takes to train somebody. So kind of get an idea of how many people you train. And it could seriously be a guesstimate. So when we start looking at, let's say you're applying for a merchandising position that requires all of these different areas. So when you start thinking about your qualification summary or your skill summary, you could think, okay, well, I have retail sales associate experience. I could say I have over 3 years, even if it's just 3 years and 2 days. You train 12 associate and cashiers, client development ability to increase clients 25% each year. So you're thinking more critically about what the skills you're bringing, but you're also looking at that job description to say, okay, have I presented ideas? How have I presented ideas? Have I ever sat in meetings? Yeah, I coordinated 5 events for fashion shows. So there's different things that you could pull, even if it wasn't a paid type of job, but it's just for class projects or volunteer or even a school club or whatnot. The other part that you could pull on there is your transferable skills. Transferable skills basically means that you have a skill that you utilize someplace else that could easily transfer to the new job. It may not be exact, but it's pretty darn close. So think about the relevant ones. So once again, look at that job description. It's very important to become very, very close to the job description. And you're looking at like your college classwork, coursework, your projects, any community service, volunteerism, any participation in your organization, even your hobbies. Sometimes your hobbies is really giving back to the community. So think about, what have I done that could be relevant to this job? And here's just a nice little idea, because a lot of times students get stuck on, I really don't have any transferable skills. I don't know much about communicating and stuff, but think about negotiating. So under communication, there's negotiating. We've all negotiated, and it could just be a skill that you have. Your friends want to go have hamburgers, you want to go have pizza, and you all end up going to pizza. How did that happen? Right? You negotiated with them. You listened and you basically convinced them that, yeah, going for pizza was a better idea. So there's ways that we do this without even really realizing these are skills and abilities that we do have. And most of you, when you look at this, will actually realize you do have a lot of skills, transferable skills that could be utilized in a lot of different areas.
Jody, can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you. Perfect.
Okay, good, because you're frozen on my end. Let's talk about the education section. When we list our education, again, we talk about the most recent, starting with the where you're currently attending and working back from there. I see this a lot. When we list Fresno State, make sure you spell out the formal official name, which is California State University, Fresno. If you want to put or refer to it as Fresno State after that, you can put it in parentheses and then refer it throughout the body of the rest of the resume as Fresno State, and that's just fine. Make sure that you know your degree, and I say this because I see a lot of Bachelor of Arts when it's a Bachelor of Science, or Bachelor of Science when it's a Bachelor of Arts. Make sure that you know what your degree is that you're pursuing, and then list it as the Bachelor of Arts or Science with the official degree name. It could be Family and Consumer Sciences in this example with the option in Family Sciences, or it could be with an emphasis in. If it's an emphasis, it's okay to list it, but on the official diploma name, it will not have the emphasis. It will just have the option in the degree title. I got asked earlier in our presentation whether we should include high school or not. We like to tell students, if you're an incoming freshman, we realize you may not have the vast experience that you'll have by the time you graduate from college. It's okay as a freshman to list your high school diploma, especially if you have honors or you were part of the president's honor roll, or as a semester honor roll person. It's okay to list high school. By the time you're a sophomore, you're acquiring much more class project experience, volunteer experience, internship, or organization clubs. You're going to want to drop off the high school on your resume. You get a mixed review when we talk about if you list activities or achievements that you received while in high school, and that's still important to list even if you're graduating from college. We have mixed reviews on whether you need to list your high school, right, Jody, at that time
Yes.
or not. Some of us say that if you list it as an achievement, or award, or recognition, that you need to list it in the education section. I'm of the belief you don't need to. I don't know, Jody, how you feel about that.
I also believe that you don't need to. Let's say that you're putting FFA or 4-H. If you're going into the realm of ag or you're staying here within the valley, those two things are very important to our area.
Right.
So if you want to list something like that, it's not necessarily important to say that you were going to Roosevelt High School FFA. You could just list it down under accomplishments or achievements.
And, the GPA is listed here. You'll notice it's a 3.45. Our recommendation is if you have a 3.0 or higher GPA, certainly list it on your resume. It's important to show employers that you were dedicated, not that you're not if it's not a 3.0, but you will make up in your clubs and organizations and your involvement with your school in other ways. So it's always good to achieve the best while going to college, but it could be a tough major, or it's something that maybe you have a 2.8 GPA and it's excellent still. But our rule of thumb is if it's a 3.0 or higher, certainly listed on the resume in your education section as well. What I see a lot of is students will list their range of attendance at Fresno State. In this second example, you'll notice over here in the right margin, we say expected. That's expected graduation. It's important that the employer know when you're graduating, not when you're attending, meaning you started August of 2019 to dash current or present. We know you're attending. The employer knows you're attending, but they want to know when you're actually graduating so they know when they can start looking at maybe giving you an interview and offering you position because you've got a semester or a year out from graduation. So make sure that you put your expected graduation date and not your dates of attendance. If you are going to list the month and the year, you can either do it numerically like we've done here, 12-20, make sure it's consistent throughout your resume, or you can put, as in the third example, May of 2022 or 23, or whenever you are going to graduate. I also want to mention that if you did attend Fresno City College or you did study abroad, it's important that you include those in your education section as well. And certainly if you are receiving a minor, you can list it here. I think you should list it here. And we get asked a lot, what if you're also getting a certificate? Well, there's different sections that you can list certificate. I have seen it sometimes up here in the education. Jody, do you have a preference one way or the other on that?
Am I frozen?
No.
Okay. It's all black on my screen. Can you repeat the question? I was trying to problem solve, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I can hear you. It's whether to list your certificates up in the education section or down in the other categories that we're going to.
If you're actually getting your certificate with your bachelor's degree, I highly suggest just put a bachelor's with their certificate. Now, let's say that you're like the one, liberal studies in the middle, liberal studies with a certificate of special event planning. Most people that's going into teaching, that's the liberal studies, will have to do special planning during the time. So that kind of goes hand in hand. Now, let's say that you're doing something that's a little bit different that you really want to highlight, like data analytics, and you're a liberal studies major and you took some classes at Craig School of Business. You might want to include that under a different trainings and certifications. So it highlights it and it brings it out. So it's not buried under your education.
Got it. I'm also answering messages here, trying to do it all at the same time. So does that help clarify? One of the questions was that. So I think it's good to indicate your certificates down in the other section. My preference, Jody, as Jody mentioned, you can do either. All right, next slide.
All right, so related coursework. So when you start thinking about related coursework, a lot of times students will sit there and I just had one earlier today going, why is this important? Because ultimately, when you think about relevant coursework, this is training. You go into a course and you don't know anything about that subject matter. Let's say it was Introduction to Entrepreneurship. You have no idea what that's all about. You learn about it, you're tested on it, you apply it, you're tested on it, you learn some more, and then you have a final. That is training. You have been trained within what is entrepreneurship. You've been trained about administration of personnel. So these are training. So that's why sometimes when you look at your resume and there's gaps of saying, you know what, I don't necessarily have the experience that they're really looking for. I've never been able to apply it outside of learning my actual class. So this is where relevant coursework comes into play because it really aligns you up with what they're looking for because you have been trained in it. This also works really well if you are trying to fill up your resume and if everything is like, I just saw a resume and everything was like a 14 font, 16 font, 18 font, so it was really big for someone who's sight impaired. It worked really great, but other than that, it looked like you were trying to fill the page by just making things bigger. You don't want to do that. Instead, you want to add more things that's going to be enrich your skills and abilities. This also helps because a lot of resumes are scanned. So they're scanning for certain terminology. So you've been able to apply some, but not all. This allows them to see this is what I'm coming to the table with. Another reason is because not all programs are created equal. So if somebody is applying from Fresno State versus Cal State Bakersfield, the programs are different. You may have taken completely different classes, even though you have a very similar degree. So this allows the reader and the employer to know what you're bringing to the table. Now, if you notice, I did not put business, number. You actually want to list the actual name of the class. It's okay to take off the word introductory, seminar, any of those key terms that is not really needed. You're just going to the gist of what the class was about. So like on Introduction to Entrepreneurship, you could have just put entrepreneurship. So under related experience, so experience, all experience is good experience. So when you start thinking about experience, if you notice, it's broken down, and I'm going to talk about why that is. But when we start actually looking at experience, it's important to see that we talk about how you talk about the title, and then you go to the organizational name, and then the city, state, and then you go month, year to month, year. If you're currently in the job, you could say to present or to current. We also talk about a power verb. And when we talk about power verb, that's an action verb. The reason we call it a power verb is because it gives your resume power, because it tells a story by just using one word. And then the next part of that accomplished statement, that bullet, is how you completed that action, and then the end results and outcome. We do not want to see job duties. Job duties is very boring to look at, but it also doesn't tell the reader what you're bringing, because saying that you waited tables, great. What did you do? What did you accomplish? Or at that intern, just because you interned in accounting doesn't mean that provided accounting services for the accountant or something like that. You don't want to just list it very vague. You want to say, what did I get out of it? So when we start looking at power verbs on our pages within our success guide, we do have a success guide. It's available on our main website, so you have full access to this. So we have two sets of power verbs. So the reason is it is very important. So let's say you're going towards teaching. You could say you demonstrated, developed, empowered, enabled, encouraged, enlightened, evaluated, explained, instead of saying I taught, I evaluate. You know, you start saying the same things over and over. I taught, I teach, I showed. Yeah, that's not good power verb. So really look at this, find the right areas for it, because every single major and every single career could really pull from these different areas. So just look at the header and go with it. So when we start thinking about experience, we really want to think about dividing it up. If you noticed on our little template, we had our experience, then we had leadership experience. Great. But there's other things that you could talk about. If you have a lot of field work within yours, you could say field work experience, volunteer experience, professional experience, relevant experience. If you're a business major, business experience, management experience if you're a business management. So there's a lot of things that you could pull. And the reason that you do different headers under the realm of experience is because when we think of work experience, we think paid. All experience, all experience, paid, unpaid, volunteer, all works within this section. So you don't want to just title it work experience. You want to have different areas. The other reason is because let's say you had something that was really, really related, but you did it about 2 years ago. If you did it in reverse chronological order and you only had one header under experience, that means that whatever you did since then is above this really, really good related experience. So if you title it related experience, that now goes to the top, and that's the very first experience that they're seeing, even though it's something that you did 2 years ago. So that's why you want to have different headers. Sometimes people say, well, how many headers can I have? Can I have more than 2? It just really depends. If you typically want to stay with one page, so within one page, 1 to 2 headers is perfectly fine. If you get to 3, that means that there has to be a reason behind going to 3 where you can't fit it anyplace else. The other experience is something that you have done. Like I said, I was a food server. So it had nothing to do with the realm of counseling. So what I wanted to do when I graduated, I wanted to show them that I have work ethic. So I put under other experience, I was able to put food server, TGI Fridays, Fresno, California, and the date. I didn't have to explain. I didn't have to do any accomplishment bullets because everyone knows what a food server does. So it's just showing, you know what, I have a good work ethic. I've worked at different places. So I'm putting it on my resume. It's taking one line with a bullet, and that's it. I'm not going to elaborate on it, but it does give the reader an idea that you've worked for several years, even though it was outside of the realm of the area you're going into. So when you start listing the Learning Center, or start listing the different careers, the biggest thing that you have to think about is the formatting. You could list the job title first and then the place that you did it with the dates, or you could go where you worked at and then put the job title and the dates. The biggest thing is staying consistent. As long as you're consistent throughout, that's the biggest thing. You have to stay consistent. So if you do it for one, you have to do it for all. If you're bolding the job title, you're bolding all the job titles.
Correct.
If you're italicizing, you have to italicize.
Consistent, consistent, consistent.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm with you.
And over here, if you notice the Mecca on the PR recruiting co-chair, be very careful when you start using abbreviations. Not everybody knows what that means. So you really want to be able to spell it out, and even the Mecca is spelled differently even as an acronym. So make sure that you go to the site, you actually get the true spelling, and you know exactly how they're abbreviating things.
So true. I see that a lot when reviewing resumes of students, and I have no idea. So assume that the employer does not know anything about you, because chances are they don't. And whenever you abbreviate, they're not going to know what that means, nor are they going to dig in to try to find out what that means on a resume.
And also, if you go to our Career Success Guide where you found our power verbs, we also have a variety of sample resumes. So this is just one page of several resumes. And if you notice, there's not one size fits all. Everything's a little bit different, and that's perfectly fine. You find a format and that you really enjoy, that you really like, that really represents you and the industry you're going into, and you kind of run with that.
Excellent. Okay.
So memberships and awards for Sheila.
That's me. Make sure that you list all of the awards that we talked about, even while in high school, that are important and high achieving that employer would want to know. Any accomplishments you've done, any community involvement, extracurricular activities, professional associations, developments, honors, and awards. This section right here can be listed one of multiple ways. I can't tell you the number of students that don't list anything because they're either not an officer with that organization or club or whatever. It's critical that you list, even if you're volunteering at a church or at a school after school hours, or even if you were part of a team or classroom project that you received an honor or award from. It's important and it's vital that you list that. It shows that you were involved. It shows that you were part of a team, or it shows that what you've done with your academic career while pursuing your degree. It's important that you do get involved. If you're not a part of a club or organization while in college and all you do is go to school and go to work, that's okay. But you can fit in an extra hour here or there to get involved, to show the employer that you just did more than go to school and work. You actually were involved in the community.
And another reason that you want to include like community involvement, and the reason it says community involvement instead of community service is words have power. So think about the word involvement versus a service. I provide a service versus I got involved. It shows an entire different level of engagement. But the other thing is, if you read most mission statements of almost any industry, of any company, they're going to say something about giving back to the community, being part of the community. And if you yourself does not have nothing about community involvement on your resume, you're no longer aligning with the own mission statement of that company. So showing that you're involved, even if it's the community of Fresno State, it's something about giving back.
Thank you, Jody. I'm answering a question. You might want to address this, and
Okay.
you did address it previously when putting your contact information. They're asking again, I noticed you're only putting the city. Is that how we should list our state or address?
The biggest thing is when you're going through, see up here it says address, city, state. It depends on the industry you're going into. Let's say you're going into a counseling realm or a teaching realm. That industry is very nosy. If you don't put an address there, we're going to wonder what you're hiding. It is what it is. So you have to think about the industry. What is industry appropriate? So teaching, counseling, or nosy. We like to know where you live. And there's really no rhyme or reason, but when we don't see it because it's out of the norm, we wonder why, because of the industry within the realm of education and mental health. But if you're applying to a tech company, they could care less where you're living, because a lot of them will be telecommuting, or they know that this is a really good job. You're gonna move wherever is needed. So they're looking at your skills and abilities more so than where you live. So that's why you wouldn't include. Now, if you did list just your city and state, like I said before, I gave an example. If you're originally from Los Angeles, you really want to show that, hey, I'm a local here, because those places like Bay Area and also Southern California, our students have often said, yes, I will go to this place and accept a job. But what happens is when they realize and actually do some research that for me to live in San Francisco, I get to stay in basically a 12 by 12 room and pay $1,800 to $2,300 a month for that. No. And so then you renege on that job. So they automatically think, if you're not from here and you don't understand what the market is to actually live here, then the chances of them taking you very seriously will be very minimal. So you definitely want to basically say of an address there. It could be a friend's address, it could be a parent's address, a loved one, an aunt, an uncle, to ultimately say that you live in that area. Now, what I hear a lot of times is students go, well, what if I just want to move and I've never lived there, but I visited there, I've done this and this. Then that's when your cover letter should state that you're in the process of relocating. One of my very first professional jobs was over at Arizona State, and I put on my cover letter that I'm in the process of relocating to the Phoenix area. I had never been to the Phoenix area, and I said I was in the middle of relocating there. I got the interview, and within 5 days of the interview, they hired me, and they wanted me to start in 6 days. I was able to close up my apartment, move, get everything, my registered car, get a driver's license there, everything, and start in 6 days. Why? Because I had a full-time job with benefits waiting for me. It's amazing on how fast you can move. So if you are serious about wanting to relocate, then you can make it happen.
So we're looking at 12:46, and I think we are about done with the presentation.
So the biggest thing is you could contact us. We have virtual semester hours. So we do have a liaison for every single college. So you could connect with your liaison for one-on-one, or you could go to the virtual career cafe, which is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. And you just go into the bit.ly that's listed here and you go directly in. If you don't have that copied, you could just go to our main website, which is at the bottom, which is fresnostate.edu/careers. And it's on the carousel and you could just click and it'll take you directly into the career cafe also. They could assist you with resumes very easily. And the biggest thing is you definitely want to remember a resume is fluid. It's a living document, basically. You're always going to be adding to it. It's never going to stop. Even after you get your career, it's never going to stop. You're always going to be adding to it throughout your life of your career.
So true, because like I said, I see resumes. In fact, I just had a job opening and I noticed that some of the applicants did not tailor their resume to the job opening. They left it for a previous position that they were applying to. So make sure that when you are applying to companies that you change your resume to match what it is they're looking for and tailor it to the position you're applying to.
So is there any other questions that we could answer?
I think we've gotten them all.
So definitely go to our main website, the fresnostate.edu/careers. Like I said, you will find our career success guide. I'm holding up a physical copy of it.
Nobody can see you, Jody.
Oh, no one can see me.
I'll show mine.
It's 99% black on my screen, so I'm just seeing a sliver and I can't do anything.
I'll show mine.
So you could actually go onto our main website. You could download it, or you could actually view it from there. The biggest thing is it has a lot of good information, from resumes to interviewing, but the resume section, the cover letters, everything that with the documents is so important to look at. Even though on the resumes you'll see maybe a teaching one, don't worry if you're not going into teaching but you like that style. So look at everything. If you're looking for class projects and you're saying, how exactly do I list a class project? If you're listing that class project, the number one thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is saying, okay, well, let me look at the engineering, because engineering has a lot of class projects that's listed. So pick and choose. You don't have to follow one exact one. There's several samples there, but find something that is very interesting to you, that you find appealing. It does not have to be a certain font size or a style. The most common one is Calibri or Times New Roman. I'm not a fan of Times New Roman. It's very cut and dry. It's straight. It's very military aspect to it. But a Calibri has some more roundedness to it. So think about what it looks like to the viewer, and even change the styling can often change the style of your resume. Another tip of looking at your resume is put it aside for a while and then open it up either on your document, on your screen as one solid document, and see where your eyes are automatically drawn towards. Sometimes there's too much of a space in one area, or it's really has a lot of black type in that area because it's just chock full of information. So look at your resume and say, okay, why is my eyes drawn here? And so more than likely, an employer's eyes are going to be drawn to the exact same place. So if that is the case, you want to make sure that that's really something good. That's really highlighting a skill and ability, not just drawing your eyes to someplace that just because there's a misspelled word or you did a couple of spaces instead of a single space.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you found this useful. We look forward to seeing you in our virtual career cafe or at the career fairs next week. Thank you all for joining us.